Over the next 5 to 10 years, the real big problem in this area is getting people back on their feet or having them implement their resilience. But the issue is, in order to do that, someone has to admit what the situation is. And that's where it's not happening. The agencies and the companies are not laying out, this is the damage that's still out there. So throughout these 5 years, the message from BP is that all the crude is gone, everything's fine in the environment, everything's back to normal. 2 weeks ago, in anticipation of the 5th anniversary, they released a report that basically said everything in the environment is good. So as we go through the next 5 or 10 years, the perception for the public at large is that it's all over. What are these people complaining about? Reality is not that at all. So how do you keep trying to recover when the bigger message from the oil companies, all of them, not just BP, and from the regulatory agencies, it's all fine? That's going to be our very largest challenge as we move into the future. So as a result of exposure to the crude oil and the dispersants, the people had a huge number of health impacts. And when they would try and go to a doctor, the doctor would tend to say, you just have bronchitis, I'll give you antibiotics, and it's fine. Early in the process, communities asked me to develop a list of the health impacts associated with the crude and with the dispersant. They thought if they had those lists, they could go to their doctor and say, these are the ones that are associated with the crude and the dispersant, and this is what I have. I need you to treat me for all of the things I have. And the doctors would not do it for the most part. There were a few doctors that would address the situation, but for the most part, the medical community turned their back on these people and the health impacts. We did health surveys. We did all this kind of work. We tried to get the medical community to be willing to treat them appropriately. And for the most part, those medical communities also get a lot of their livelihood from the oil and gas industry. You know, like their service company doctors, they do pre-employment physicals and all. And a lot of them will tell you off the record, they were scared if they started saying, yes, the medical conditions you have are associated with BP. Then they would lose all their business. So there was a real lack of the medical community stepping forward and saying, yes, these are the health impacts, and yes, these are the people that are experiencing them, and this is the kind of treatment they should be receiving. So the few doctors that would treat them did a really, really good job with the patients that they treated, but they were also criticized by the mainstream medical community. And every time you'd work with them to come up with like surveys of this is the health impacts, it would just be pushed out of the way by the normal medical communities. But it's normal because we had Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, Gustav and Ike, and we had huge sediment sludge that was scooped up out of all the water bodies and laid all over the surface. And people got really, really sick from that. And yet, when we were trying to get those kind of illnesses addressed, it was the same thing. They didn't want to admit that that sediment sludge had all these toxins in it, and the people who came and worked in those areas were being exposed to it and were being made sick. And there was no acknowledgement whatsoever.